June 6th, 1944. Somewhere above Normandy, paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Airborne Division stand in the red-lit bellies of C-47s, ready to step into the black. Strapped to their legs is a weapon so crude that GIs instantly nicknamed it the plumber's nightmare, the cake decorator, and most often the grease gun, because it looked exactly like the tool mechanics used to lubricate tanks. It cost $18.50 to build. The Thompson it was meant to replace still ran more than $200 even after wartime simplification. The M3 was deliberately designed to be disposable. When it broke, you were supposed to toss it aside like an empty ration can. No spare parts were even budgeted. Soldiers took one look and recoiled in disgust. Yet this pressed sheet metal abomination would remain in American service for half a century, longer than any other submachine gun in U.S. history. It fought from Normandy to the Gulf War, and quiet, suppressed versions are still carried by certain special units today. This is the story of the gun no one wanted, that no one could ever quite replace. By 1941, the United States faced a hard truth. The Thompson was magnificent. Gangsters, Marines, and GIs all adored its walnut stocks and precision machining, but each one drank 150 man-hours of skilled labor and cost the price of a new Ford. America was about to fight across two oceans. There was no time, no steel, no skilled hands for perfection. Ordnance officers studied what worked for enemies and desperate allies. The Germans had the MP-40, all stamped steel, cheap, reliable. The British, backs to the wall in 1940, had hammered out the Sten, so primitive it looked like garden shed work, yet it cost pennies and it shot. In October 1942, the requirement was brutally simple. Give us a .45 ACP submachine gun made almost entirely of stamped steel, keep the cyclic rate under 500 RPM, and make it cheaper. Much, much cheaper. Two men from General Motors answered the call. George Hyde, a designer at GM's Inland Division, and Frederick Sampson, chief engineer at Guide Lamp Division, the same plant that turned out blackout headlights for Army trucks. What they delivered was radical in its lack of refinement. The receiver was two halves of sheet steel folded and spot welded together. Only the barrel, bolt face, and sear were machined. Everything else was stamped, pressed, or welded. Total parts count, 23. Final unit cost, $18.50. The Army declared it expendable. Production began in May 1943. From clean sheet to first delivery took 7 months, an American firearms record that has never been beaten. By VE Day, more than 606,000 M3s and 15,000 improved M3A1s had rolled off the lines. The grease gun's combat debut came on the greatest stage of the war, D-Day, June 6, 1944. Paratroopers leaping into the Norman darkness carried them strapped to their legs. Unlike the Thompson, the M3 did not have to be broken down for the jump. Land, flip the stock open, and you were in the fight. At 22.8 inches, collapsed it fit inside cramped gliders and C-47 door bundles perfectly. First impressions were savage. Private Don Burgett, 101st Airborne, called it a piece of gutter pipe with a trigger. Many troopers in the 82nd Flat Out refused to surrender their Thompsons, seeing the new weapon as an insult to their elite status. Trainees at Camp Gruber, Oklahoma, treated it with open contempt, sneering that it was a shoddy knockoff of the MP-40. The hatred was not entirely unfair. Early M3s had real problems. The cocking handle was a flimsy piece of stamped metal welded to the right side of the bolt. Drop the gun on that side, and it snapped clean off. turning the weapon into an 8-pound club. Field depots in Normandy were soon buried under piles of crippled grease guns. Ordnance techs improvised, slotting receivers and fabricating new handles in the field. Photos from Patton's Third Army during the Bulge show dozens of these battlefield repairs. The 30-round magazine was another curse. Single feed, hard to load, and it jammed at the slightest speck of Normandy mud. GIs took to hammering the magazine catch with the butt of an entrenching tool to keep magazines from falling out, or cutting M1 Garand op rod springs into pieces to stiffen the latch. Then something changed. As the war ground on, soldiers discovered that when the early gremlins were cured, the M3 worked, really worked. A February 1945 combat report from the 99th Infantry Division read, "The M3 submachine gun is the best close-quarter weapon we have for night patrolling. It comes into action instantly and is extremely accurate and powerful at short range. It weighed only 8 pounds loaded, 5 pounds lighter than the Thompson, so a man could carry twice the ammunition. Its slow 350 to 400 RPM cyclic rate made it controllable and conserved ammunition. And once the bugs were ironed out, it proved almost unkillable." One GI told Warfare History Network, "I hated it the day they issued it. Looked like junkyard leftovers. But I dragged that thing through mud you could lose a Jeep in, never cleaned it once, and it never jammed on me. Never. It worked in North African sand, in the frozen Ardennes freeze, in Pacific downpours. Official mud and sand tests showed the fully enclosed M3 outperforming every other U.S. submachine gun ever tested. Tankers adored it. By 1944, Sherman tanks left the factory with brackets for up to 5 grease guns. Corporal Carlton Chapman of the all-black 761 Tank Battalion, the Black Panthers, was famously photographed in November 1944 with his M3 poking from the commander's hatch near Nancy, France. Even concentration camps were liberated with it. On April 6, 1945, troopers of the 47th Tank Battalion shot the locks off OFlag 64 with bursts from their grease guns, freeing nearly 500 captured American officers. There was a secret chapter too. The OSS forerunner of the CIA needed a silent submachine gun for agents and resistance fighters. The M3's short overall length and subsonic .45 round were ideal. In late 1942, the OSS ordered 1,000 specially modified M3s from High Standard. Bell Labs designed a 14.5-inch suppressor using wrapped wire mesh instead of baffles. The result was so quiet that the loudest sound was the bolt cycling. These OSS grease guns were parachuted to European partisans for assassination missions. Some were even fitted with 9mm conversion kits to use captured German ammunition. The war ended, but the grease gun refused to die. In December 1944, the improved M3A1 was adopted. No more fragile cocking handle, just a finger hole in the bolt. The wire stock doubled as a magazine loader and wrench. An oiler lived in the grip. In Korea, Ithaca made another 33,000 M3A1s. In Vietnam, it armed helicopter crews, tunnel rats, SEALs, LRRPs, and Montagnard tribesmen, everyone. Suppressed M3A1s went on cross-border missions where silence was life. When Delta Force stood up in 1977, the suppressed grease gun was their first submachine gun. Some sources say they still carried them during the 1980 Eagle Claw attempt in Iran. M3A1s rode inside M60 Pattons and M113s clear through Desert Storm in 1991. One tank company commander reported having 2 still in his arms. Room in 2001. Official retirement came only in 1992, half a century after the first one. rolled off the guide lamp line. The M3 grease gun is one of history's great paradoxes. Built in 7 months by a company that made headlights, cost $18.50, looked like a hardware store mistake, was issued with the instruction, throw it away when it breaks, and somehow outlasted the gorgeous Thompson, the M1 carbine, the M14, nearly every other small arm in the inventory. In the end, war doesn't care how pretty your weapon is or how much it cost. It only asks one question: does it go bang every single time a life depends on it? For 50 years, across every climate and every battlefield America fought on, the ugly little grease gun answered yes. George Hyde and Fred Sampson set out to build the cheapest submachine gun imaginable. They accidentally built one that turned out to be priceless.